Episode 132 of CppCast with guest Antony Polukhin, recorded January 3rd, 2018. This episode of CppCast is sponsored by Undo. Debugging C++ is hard, which is why Undo's technology is proven to reduce debugging time by up to 2/3. Memory corruptions, resource leaks, race conditions, and logic errors can now be fixed quickly and easily. So visit undo.io to find out how its next-generation debugging technology can help you find and fix your bugs in minutes, not weeks. CppCast is also sponsored by Embo++. The upcoming conference will be held in Bochum, Germany from March 9th to 11th. Meet other embedded systems developers working on microcontrollers, alternative kernels, and highly customizable zero-cost library designs. Get your ticket today at embo.io. In this episode, we talk about speeding up your builds and context-exploring everything. Then we talk to Antony Polukhin, author and maintainer of several Boost libraries. Antony talks to us about some of his Boost libraries and standards committee work. Welcome to episode 132 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, happy 2018.
Oh, you know what? It's 2018 and I still don't have my flying car. That's all I can say.
Yeah, so starting with a little bit of disappointment, I guess. But yeah, hopefully it'll be a good year. 2017 was pretty good overall, especially for the podcast at 100 episodes.
Right.
Yeah, so plenty to look forward to. Do you ever do anything particularly exciting for the new year?
No, my main goal with all the travel I'd been doing lately was to stay at home doing nothing for the holidays.
Nice.
Which I mostly succeeded at doing.
Yeah, I have kids, so we don't ever stay up for New Year's anymore until they're a little bit older, I guess. But we had a good time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at the top of every episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. We got a lot of tweets over the past few weeks while we were off. This one was from Rodrigo Montero, and he writes, and now for a change from just having videos and articles on this thread, a podcast, CppCast is an excellent way to keep up with modern C++, which should be highly relevant to many game programmers. And this was at the end of a thread where he was suggesting, I guess, lots of YouTube videos and other resources game programmers can use to learn more about their trade. And it was nice for him to recommend the podcast too.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Joining us today is Antony Polukhin. Antony was born in Russia. Since university days, he started contributing to Boost and became a maintainer of the Boost.LexicalCast library. Today, he works for Yandex, helps Russian-speaking people with C++ standardization proposals, consults Russian companies in C++, and continues to contribute to the open source and to the C++ language in general. You may find his code in Boost libraries such as Any, Conversion, DLL, LexicalCast, Stacktrace, TypeTrates, Variant, and others. Antony, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, LexicalCast is the one where you can just, cast anything to a string, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, and you can cast a string or pointer to characters to anything you like, any numbers.
Okay. How did you get started maintaining that?
Oh, accidentally. I was kind of bored on my first walk, and I started gazing at the source codes of the Boost libraries, and finally I found a place in LexicalCast that could be done better. After a few weeks, there was a patch. The maintainer accepted it, and after a few months, I was nominated to be a maintainer of the Boost LexicalCast.
So are you still the maintainer of it?
Yeah, of it and of many other libraries like Any and Boost Variant.
Okay. How long have you been involved with Boost now?
about 5 years or even more.
Okay,
Wow.
cool.
Okay, well, Anton, we have a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and then we'll start talking more about some of your contributions to Boost and some of your other work, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so this first one is a GitHub repository for running Clang in your browser. And this is pretty impressive. It brings Emscripten in and compiles Clang using it or WebAssembly. And then you can compile some code and actually execute it in your browser. It's pretty amazing, right, Jason?
Yeah, so Clang compiled into WebAssembly, then running in the browser, and then from there you can compile things into WebAssembly.
Right.
I don't know if there's a practical use here, but...
Yeah, now you can compile your code even longer.
It does take some time to compile Clang in order to compile any other program, but it's pretty cool for a demo.
Actually, this feature is kind of really nice for teaching because it takes a lot of time to set up your compiler, your standard library, your IDE to teach people how to write make files or something like this. But with this feature, all you need is a student, a browser, and the hello world.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that stuff on GitHub cannot compile hello world because it doesn't work with std.cout and other global variables, but...
Right.
Okay. I was wondering about that when I saw in the demo that they're using puts, which I have no problem with for a simple demo here, but I wondered about the decision. I didn't see that was the problem.
Oh, okay. Next one, we have one of Kate Gregory's talks is her Meeting C++ keynote, which I didn't have a chance to watch. I meant to watch it this morning, just ran out of time before we got ready for the show. But it looks like all the Meeting C++ videos are now online, right, Jason?
Oh, I don't think all of them are up yet.
No? Okay. The keynotes,
because I didn't think any of mine were up yet.
Okay, well, it looks like the Meeting C++ keynotes are out. I guess they're still working on some of the other videos.
Yeah, the keynotes are definitely out. Now I'm curious which ones from 2017 are up. Well, anyhow. Yeah, I think Jens is still working on it, but they are coming up for sure.
Did you have a chance to attend Kate's keynote?
I attended, I believe, about half of it.
Okay.
Yes, and it looks like there's 10 videos from Meeting C++ 2017 up right now. But yeah, it was good. The part that I saw was definitely good. And you might notice that the keynote length is 2 hours for that video.
Yeah.
Jens Meeting C++ has the longest keynotes, I believe, of any conference that I'm aware of.
Very good. Well, I'll definitely have to watch that one. Anton, did you have a chance to watch any of the Meeting C++ keynotes?
I've just watched a few of them, and I'd like to say that Kate Gregory is awesome.
Yeah.
She's really great, and she helped some of my friends even without knowing that. Some of my friends were writing courses for C++ beginners.
Oh.
And they've got a pack of about 5 people. They started to develop the C++ course, and the first versions were really bad. They've got pointers all around the course. They were teaching people to call new and delete in the first week. And then the leader of the course, he saw the Kate's talk about how to teach modern C++. After that, those guys rewrite all the course. They've just changed it totally. And now it's really awesome course for the beginners. It's one of the most popular courses on Coursera, and it's just awesome. I know that they would like to say thank you, Gregory, and this show is a perfect place to say that. Thank you, Kate.
That's excellent. I'm sure she appreciates that. And if you teach her talk, Stop Teaching C, really makes you think. Like, how should we approach teaching modern C++ to people? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely a great talk. Okay, this next one is another article from PBS Studio. These ones are always really well written. And this one is about speeding up the build of C++ projects. And I don't know about you guys, but I learned at least one new thing here. This article kind of goes in a lot of different directions. It talks about Unity builds and compiler cache, distributed compilation. But when they're talking about forward declarations, I knew that you could forward declare a class and then use it as a pointer. But I didn't know you could do like a const reference and do that with only a forward declaration.
I knew you could do with the const reference, but I think he also says if it's a return value.
Yeah, that too.
That surprised me.
Yeah, if you have a return value, and then you can get away with just a forward declaration instead of including the header file that declares that class.
I need to spend some time looking at that.
Yeah. Anything else either of you wanted to highlight with this article?
I just know the guys that developing this stuff, and guys from PBS Studio. I just meet them at some of the Russian meetings. They're always awesome. They tell wonderful stories, and they have a really good tool for static analysis of C++ code.
Since you
That's
mentioned,
all I know.
Since you mentioned the Russian C++ community, I've heard that it's quite large. Like at your meetings and your local conferences, you get a lot of people. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We've got conferences, and there's about 500 or 1,000 of attenders on the big conferences. We've got small group meetings. There's about 100 people. And we've got a set of chats in different, it's called Telegram. It's kind of Skype, but for Russia.
Okay.
And there is a channel where there are 2,000 professional programmers and a lot of programmers that just start their path with C++. So the community, yes, is kind of big and interesting.
So there's a conference coming up soon in Russia, right?
Yeah, there's a conference in St. Petersburg. You're welcome to join.
Okay.
By the way, it's really warm now in Moscow, and in Petersburg we've got 5 degrees by Celsius outside. It's about 30 degrees warmer than usual.
Yeah, that sounds really warm, yeah.
We get no snow.
Wow.
And it looks like it's summer, not winter.
Oh, wow.
So
that is not what you think of for January in Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be warm here.
Wow.
And Petersburg. So come on, join. That is going to be fun.
Okay.
How long has that conference been going on? Because, the CPP conference is still relatively new. It's in its 3rd or 4th year now, Jason?
CppCon maybe 5th year, but it was merged from a couple of other conferences.
Right. How long have the Russian C++ conferences been around?
I've been participating in the first conferences, and that was about 4 years ago.
Okay. And then this last article we have, Jason, you want to introduce this one about C++ 17 and constexpr everything?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention this, the Reddit discussion specifically, because you have a lot of interesting conversation from Gabby and STL and other people that we recognize about the history of constexpr and where it originally came from and some of the discussion. And I've heard other people involved in the C++ committee talk about this, how anytime there's some new feature in the language, everyone insists on it being very verbose. So we need a new keyword. We need constexpr or whatever the keyword is. But then after a few years of using it, everyone says, well, why does the syntax have to be so verbose? We really want. But anyhow, so there's just it's a great amount of conversation on the Reddit discussion specifically about the history of constexpr. So I thought I would mention it.
Okay. Well, Anton, why don't you tell us a little bit about Boost.DLL and what the purpose of that Boost library is?
Oh, actually, it's kind of small and simple library. Actually, it was part of the Boost application library. And the author of that library, Renato, if I remember correctly, he proposed that library for Boost review. The library wasn't ready, but there was a really interesting component for working with plugins. And I've talked with that guy, with Renato, and we've forked the Boost application. Now it's Boost DLL. We've removed all except the dynamic library loading stuff, added more classes, and here it comes. Here it is at the Boost DLL library that simplifies your work with plugins. Mostly it's a wrapper around system calls like DL open and load library, and some utility stuff to gaze inside the plugin and find out symbols that are exported from the plugin, sections that are in the plugin, and other stuff. Oh, and by the way, the core part of the Boost DLL library is the shared library class that does the DL open and DL close. It is proposed for inclusion into the C++ standard. So hopefully we'll see it in C++ 20 or 23 or 26. Well, you got the pattern.
So let me clarify. Boost DLL, the point is for loading plugins, effectively shared libraries, dynamically choosing to load them, right?
Yes.
And you're saying that the functionality of that has been proposed for C++?
Yes.
And what has been the feedback so far from the standards community?
The standards committee doesn't like shared objects.
No, I'm sure they don't.
So there's been about 4 or 5 iterations. So the proposal, it becomes smaller and smaller, less functionality in there, but it becomes more beautiful, more strict, more kind of nice.
Okay. Now, for anyone who's ever had to do this before, it's so much boilerplate that you have to do for each operating system, and having a standard way of doing it would be very handy.
Yeah, there's a really nice thing that I like most of them, that I really like, is the ability to pass a flag, please apply platform-specific decorations to the path to the library. So you can write, I don't know, my library, and on Windows that will be my library.dll. On Linux, this would be lib mylibrary.so, and so forth on different platforms. That's my favorite part of the library.
Yeah, it's frustrating if you do something like write a C library or C++ library that can be loaded by Python, and then the Python module loader system expects .so on Windows. And it's, that kind of thing changes between releases. It's the kind of thing I've had to chase down a few times in the work that I do. So yes, having a do the smart thing and load the right thing sounds great.
Yeah. You mentioned that this was derived from the Boost application library, which didn't make it into Boost. Is that still being worked on though?
I'm not really sure. I know that there are really nice parts in that library, like call to make a daemon on Linux and service on Windows, one function to do that in a cross-platform manner. But that's all I know about Boost application.
Okay.
We talked earlier about in your bio about some of the other Boost libraries you worked on. Do you want to talk a little bit more about some of these other ones that we haven't discussed before in the show? How about Boost Stacktrace?
Oh, that's kind of new library, and mostly it's for debugging purposes. So you can say Boost Stacktrace variable, and that variable will hold the current stack trace. You can put it into the exception, you can print it to the cout or whatever you like, and it will decode the stack, showing function names, location of the function in the source codes, and so forth. You can see such things in C# language or in Java, where when you get an exception, it prints a pretty Stacktrace, and that's it. That's the Boost Stacktrace library. And by the way, that library is also will be proposed to the C++ standardization committee someday.
That's an interesting one because, on Java and C#, you've got a virtual machine where it seems a little bit more obvious how you would have access to the stack. So what do you do in C++ to actually generate your stack?
Mostly all the compilers have intrinsics for generating the stack. Like GCC and Clang have specific system library calls for collecting the stack. And they use those calls for exception handling and stack unwinding. On Windows, it's nightmare. You don't want to know what's happening in there. But it involves COM, Common Object Model.
Last time I worked with COM, I was working with Visual Basic 6.
Good for you.
What are some of these other libraries? Boost Any, Boost Conversion?
Boost Any and Boost Conversion are not my libraries. They were developed by other people, and I'm just maintain them. Just keep an eye on them to update tests, fix warnings, update docs. That's mostly it. That's it.
Okay.
Same story with Boost Variant, but now there's a lot of people who want to make Boost Variant faster and better, and they propose different nice features for the Boost Variant.
Boost Variant took a different design path than standard variant, right?
Yes, and it's really great to see that the standard variant took different paths.
Okay.
There are dark corners in the Boost variant that you do not want to use. Like there is a recursive Boost variant. You can make a recursive Boost variant. So it's a Boost variant that contains itself within itself.
Right.
It involves a template metaprogramming hell. It involves, if I'm not mistaken, a few undefined behaviors, and it involves a few suboptimal things, like that recursive wrapper. It actually a thing that cannot hold null pointer. So when you move it, it actually does dynamic allocation and copy constructs the other stuff.
Oh. Well, it makes sense that they would have to for a recursive thing like that, but to bake in dynamic allocation into something like variant, which shouldn't do dynamic allocation because it can know the size ahead of time, that seems less than ideal.
Yeah, so I really like the path that the standard committee took. It's more obvious and simpler to implement.
I wanted to interrupt this discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. You have an extensive test suite, right? You're using TDD, continuous integration, and other best practices. But do all of your tests pass all the time? Getting to the bottom of intermittent and obscure test failures is crucial if you want to get the full value from these practices. And Undo's live recorder technology allows you to easily fix the bugs that don't otherwise get fixed. Capture recordings of failing tests in your test suites and debug them offline so that you can collaborate with your development team and customers. Get your software out of development and into production much more quickly, and be confident that it is of higher quality. Visit undo.io to see how they can help you find out exactly what your software really did as opposed to what you expected it to do, and fix your bugs in minutes, not weeks. In addition to all the Boost libraries, you also are the author of the Boost C++ Application Development Cookbook, and that just had a second edition release, right? Do you want to tell us a bit about the book?
Well, it's a good book. Actually, it was my lucky day that this book appeared. I was really active at the Boost mailing list, and the publishing agency was searching for a person who could write a book for them. they got the great idea that Boost libraries is just a list of libraries. If you get some trouble, some problem that you wish to solve, you can map your problem to a library. You have to read through all the libraries and then find out the matching one. It's linear search. So, for example, if you get a problem, you need to parse date time. You just cannot figure out that you need a Boost Spirit or Boost regex without reading through all the libraries in the Boost docs.
Right.
And that's the idea of the book. It has some typical problems and answers how to solve that problem using Boost. And a bunch of comments how to do it faster, how would that solution look in C++ 17, C++ 14, how it would look with C++ 20 or networking TS, and so forth.
So the book is published in English, I assume?
Yes.
I'm curious if you have a Russian version of it also.
No, I don't have.
Okay. Yeah. I've talked to several non-native English speakers who just don't like reading technical books that have been translated. They want to read the original English version because it's less likely to have mistakes, I've been told. But I figured if you are the Russian author, then you probably wouldn't have mistakes in your Russian version of your own book.
Yeah, that's true. But there is a confusion when you translate C++ technical book to Russian because of earlier bad translation in 19th years. There is a big confusion in the technical books. For example, operators and expression in Russian language, if you translate them, they're switched. So if you read expression in English, it's actually translated to Russian as operator.
Huh.
Yeah, that blows your mind.
So you're saying, like earlier Russian technical books had this mistake?
Yeah, and that mistake just was split all around the books, all around the technical stuff. So now when you translate operator, you must write in Russian word for expression. When you translate English word expression, you have to write Russian word for operator. That's awful. And there's a lot of such places.
Okay.
Do most Russian C++ developers learn with English books, or do they learn with these Russian books that have these mistakes?
Well, usually you start with Russian books.
Okay.
And then you go to the English literature and it blows your mind.
I imagine that would.
Okay. Have you gotten a lot of good feedback about the book? Has it done well?
Yeah, I've got a lot of good feedback for the first book. And the second edition, it just came out and there's not much feedback yet.
It's good to see that you are continuing to update it, though. I feel like a lot of books basically get abandoned. And so it's good to see that there's, you're doing multiple editions of it and updating it.
Oh, yes. All the source codes are available at GitHub. Also, there is a website that allows to compile the examples from the book online, to modify them and compile online, and to run them. So I think it's a good way to start playing around with Boost.
Jason, did you want to ask about some context purification?
Yeah, so Anton, in an earlier email, you said that you had been working on better application of constexpr through the standard library. What have you been involved with?
My first proposal to the C++ committee was about adding constexpr to array, move iterator, reverse iterator, some helper functions like begin, advance, next. And that paper was accepted into the C++ 17.
Okay.
That was an easy start. Then it gets worse. Second paper was about adding constexpr to the algorithm header, and it didn't make it into the C++ 17. Half of the paper made it into C++20. I do hope that the remaining part of the paper will also make it to the C++20 on the next meeting. And there's a lot of other places where const.expr must be added. By the way, I've got some enthusiasts that working on the remaining parts of standard library on adding const.expr, and Jason, your talk about const.expr everything really helped us. We didn't note it, for example, that stud pair missing const.expr in a few places.
Yeah, right. Excuse me. So, since you said that you wrote the original paper on applying const.expr to array, I have to ask, because I've had this question for like a year now. Why does standard array fill member function? Why is that not const.expr?
The standard, the fill member function and functions for comparisons of array are not const.expr because they rely on the stud algorithm functions being const.expr.
Okay.
So first the paper on making all the algorithm const.expr must be accepted, and only after that we can make stud array more const.expr.
Okay, that answers a long-standing question for me. Thank you.
Jason, what else we got?
Oh,
Sorry.
so you also said that you're working on the ability to move subobjects out from, for example, like a pair or a tuple. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I've got a paper on allowing more optimizations for the compiler, mostly for making copy and move elision for sub-objects. That's the short story. The long story is following. Once upon a midnight dreary, I was gazing at the disassembly, and here's what I saw in there. There's been some object A, and there's been a lot of work with that object A. Some member functions were called, some other stuff was done with that object A. At some point, object B was copy constructed from A, and then A was immediately destroyed. After that, all the work was done with object B.
Okay.
That was strange because I wasn't implicitly writing or explicitly writing such code. I wasn't copy constructing that B object just out of thin air. I started looking at my C++ code and find out that there is a function that's defined in a header file and that has stud pair and returns the second element of the stud pair. And that second element is object A. And when that element is returned, it becomes an object B. So object B is copy constructed from pair second.
Right.
At that point, I've just, after a lot of thinking and discussing, I have understood that compiler sees that the object B is copy constructed and object A is destroyed. So the idea of the proposal is to allow eliding copy and move constructors for sub-objects after the inlining stage. Is that clear?
Yes. Have you gotten any feedback from anyone who works on compilers to see how plausible this is?
I've asked a few people, but I've asked them on 25th of December. So no response yet.
Okay.
Actually, that paper has some kind of improvement. There is an ultimate copy elision paper. And the idea of the ultimate copy elision is to allow eliding copy and move constructors, not just when we are returning sub-object, but always when there is a construction of some object and immediate destruction of the source object.
Right.
So this covers the cases when we return a local variable by studMove, when we return a function argument without studMove or with studMove. This covers the cases when we construct a class that holds a variable and we put in the arguments by const references, well, a lot of things, when we return from stud optional and so forth. I really hope that this paper will be accepted and the C++ code will become 2 or 3 times faster.
Yeah, I can see that being huge. One of the things that I've had conversations with lately with several people was, like you said, returning like an object, a local object, into an optional return value. And that has to be a copy or a move today. There's no way to elide that. But if we could give the compiler a way to say, I like the wording that you're saying, that if it's an object that is immediately destroyed, then you know that its lifetime is ended and you can elide the move or copy. It sounds like it has some promise to me, but I've never been on the standards committee or written any compilers, so.
So what else are you working on? Do you have any talks coming up at these Russian C++ conferences?
Yeah, I often participate in Russian conferences, and I've participated a few times in English-speaking conferences, like in CPP Con. I was describing the internals of the reflection library that works without macro and external tooling in C++14.
Right, I think I've seen that talk, actually.
Do you have any upcoming talks?
Probably in this year, yes, but I haven't thought about them. So
Okay,
I hope to participate in one of the C++ meetings somewhere in Europe or somewhere in USA in this year, but I'm not sure that it will happen. There are some problems with getting visa in Russia for USA.
Right.
I believe the C++ Now call for submissions is still open, right? So there's still that conference. And then CPP Con call for submissions has not opened yet.
Yeah.
That should be sometime early spring, right?
Generally around the time that we're wrapping up C++ Now is when I'm putting proposal for CPP Con. I don't remember when the actual date is that it opens, but that's how I look at it.
Okay. Anton, do you have any other projects you want to share that we haven't gone over, like any other Boost libraries that you've been working on recently?
Probably not. No, I've got enough Boost libraries to keep an eye on.
You certainly do.
I'd like to say that for a year now, we've got a website for Russian-speaking people that helps people to put their thoughts together and form them in a proposal for the C++ standardization committee. So if you've got some ideas about how to improve C++ language, you can write to that site. It's stdcpp.ru. And there, me and other people could help you with that.
That sounds great.
There are also some discussions of the ideas. There are voting on the ideas. So enjoy. You can join. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a great resource you're providing. Okay, well, Anton, it's been great having you on the show today. We'll put a link to that website you were just discussing in the show notes. And where can people find you online?
I'm available at mailing list, Boost mailing list. I'm available at my personal email. You can find that in any paper that I wrote for the C++ committee. I've got my kind of blog, and there you can find my email or somehow contact me in other way. And I am active member of the Telegram chat called cx6.pro. There's 2,000 people. Everyone is well educated and knows a lot about C++, and there are a lot of interesting talks.
Okay. It's been great having you on the show today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in. Or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. I'd also appreciate if you like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at LeftKiss on Twitter. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com. Website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.